we go. Orange giving the rock. Paul fights to it, has it out front against Cephalosha. Behind a Griffin pick. Stutter step. Flashes right to the baseline. Lost the ball. He back to Simpson. It's over. The Thunder win game 5. The Thunder win game 5. 105-104. Durant embraces Westbrook. The Thunder come from behind. Outscoring the Clippers by 8. The final 49.2.
I can't do it. Sorry, I can't do it. I can't have to listen to that. Makes me ill. It is tip-off today. There's a lot of news. The Jazz are in the forefront of some of it. Is it actually real or just someone needing a story? We'll talk about all that today on tip-off. It's coming up. Hi, I'm David Locke. Oh, wait. Pow. I'm David Locke, Jazz radio voice, Jazz NBA insider. All right, here's what we're going to discuss today. Had a great day yesterday. Where we are in the search, Stockton discussion, coaching update, combine measurements, games last night, new names to be mentioned, fans across the country, and introduce you to Dan Majerle as our Meet the Possible Jazz coach today. And in that, and that's maybe sneak in a film study, just a quick one. There's so much stuff out there from last night. Let me first say, yesterday I hosted a luncheon with some season ticket holders who had recently jumped in, bought some big packages, some long-time season ticket holders, just various group. I don't know what the definition there was, but it was great fun. And I thought one of the telling moments of it at the time was somebody asked me, well, which player do you think is most likely to stay if we draft them? And I gave my answer, but then I said, I don't think you know. And I think what we have to do is get out of that mindset and approach and thought. And instead, I think what it is, if we can build something good enough with the energy and the passion and the pizzazz that is Jazz Nation, that is the connection that this single professional sports team market has, in its ability to have that connection that's superior to other places, that's what's going to make someone stay. There's nothing we're never going to be able to build Salt Lake City, frankly, into a place that's appealing to a 25-year-old, mostly African-American player, even if he's LDS, frankly. Even if it's Jabari, I'll tell you what, I look at Jabari, he's from Chicago. He made a major high school announcement, and he wrote it, and he waited to make his college amount out of SI so he could write his article in SI. That doesn't sound to me like a guy who suddenly wants to stay in a small market. Okay, but none of them want to stay in a small market at this point. Nobody says that. I mean, if you're me, 43 years old with 2 kids, have a great gig and live in a gorgeous spot, that's great, but I'm not an NBA player. You're not either, unless Gordon's watching this, or Derek, or Marvin. But it's not an appealing place for an NBA player, but we have to make it that way. That's what we have to do. We have to stop worrying about who's going to – because the answer to that is no one, okay? No one's first choice. No one. Even Jabari made that perfectly clear in the ESPN LA interview. Do you want to go to Utah? No. Okay. But nobody wanted to go to Oklahoma City either. That place sucks. But they've built something that's appealing. Frankly, I'm not sure Karl Malone wanted to go to Utah, right? But we built something that was appealing. The fans are a huge part of that. The organization obviously has got to get the product. It's going to take some time. But that's the important thing to me, is that this thing's going to be built in a fashion and in a way that makes it appealing. And then the second tier of that is, I think pretty soon we've got to make sometime, I don't know, pretty soon is sometime in the next half decade, right? We've got to have some guts. So rather than sitting around the whole time and saying to ourselves, I don't think he's willing to re-sign. I think the exact opposite has to happen at some point here, where we have to find the next version of Kevin Love, who's got 2 years left on his contract, give up a lot to get him, and say to him, just give us a chance. Give us a chance to build, to show you what this place is like. You might, it's not LA when you might love it, and we hope you will. And that's deep. That's got to be a edict from the Millers through Dennis Lindsay, that we treat our players at the highest level, that we give them every luxury that we possibly can. Dennis has moved us in that direction. We have to make sure, we probably have to be a little bit better in that regard than every other place. We have to have a fan base that shows that kind of passion and support for its players, that they realize that they're a part of something special here, and that those things override the inefficiencies or insufficiencies, really, that our market has. That, to me, is the issue. And I think the fans are a huge part of it. The organization's got a lot of work they have to do, too, but we can't control that. So, and has traditionally shown that it's willing to do that, and the second generation Miller leadership, I think, has shown even another level of willingness to do that. The amount of money we're spending behind the scenes to make the players comfortable, and in the same way to make sure that our scouting staff has every access to players possible is at a very high elite level. That to me was a lot of the other questions were things we discuss here. A lot of them are listeners to this tip-off. I appreciate it very much. It was really fun to be around and see the fans and get reconnected. So I try to do it every day. It's great fun, but that was a nice time as well. All right, so Mark Stein of ESPN reported last night that the Jazz are talking to John Stockton. Frankly, somewhat, I think, of another completely unsubstantiated rumor about this coaching search as we've had this entire time. The Jazz have a very deep relationship with John, obviously. There's a statue of him out front. They did talk to him when they let Ty go, or decided not to renew Ty. They called John and talked to him at that point. Spence reported shortly thereafter that the Jazz would reach out. Now, I don't know if that was in that same thing or something separate. PK's talked about it. This organization's in communication with John the entire time. I really do think this I don't know. Mark Stein does really good work. He doesn't seem to be on point a great deal with us. He missed badly on the Hayward story last year and around the deadline, almost on kind of just felt like I don't know. I don't want to get into that, but he said they were never close. He said, oh, they're close. They were never close. So I'm not sure that I have a lot of I don't know. There's a lot going on in the reporters' world. Everyone's got to have their story. I don't feel like this one actually, frankly, it's an unsubstantiated rumor like the other premature coaching rumors we've had. Okay? That's the best way I can tell you. I don't really know what else to add. I think that's going to be a difficult thing for us and it's an interesting phenomenon what happens here, right? So Jim Boylan gets mentioned by Wojnarowski as one of the lead candidates, and maybe that was a trial balloon for all we know. And then we all just run with it. Messina gets mentioned by Thomason, and we all run with it. And Stein mentioned Stockton, and now we're all going with it. Well, I'm not really sure. Frankly, I'm not sure what the host at 1280 are supposed to do. Because, frankly, they probably should do it. It's good radio. That's what people want to talk about. It's out there. To not talk about it seems a little absurd. But then what ends up happening, kind of to no fault of their own, is the fact that you end up with a kind of a firestorm that builds on itself as though it's accurate, when I'm not sure it really is, I guess, is my point. So I don't really know what's supposed to happen about it, but that's the phenomena that we're getting here in the process. And, John is an important part of this organization, so I think it's pretty clear that he's someone they communicate with consistently. All right, let's move on to that. So it was a huge day yesterday in the coaching circles, and some twists and turns that I'm trying to figure out what the trickle-down effect is, and maybe we can walk through it together. So the thought was kind of that the Knicks and the Warriors were going to kind of flip between Steve Kerr and Stan Van Gundy. Well, Stan Van Gundy is now in Detroit as president and charge of all basketball operations, likely to hire Otis Smith as his GM, who he had in Orlando. He signed a $7 million a year deal over 5 years, and he's off the market. Steve Kerr is deciding here momentarily between the New York Knicks and the Golden State Warriors. And suddenly, let's play for a second. If Kerr goes to the Knicks, what do the Warriors do? Because I think they did this whole thing thinking they were getting Stan Van Gundy or or Steve Kerr? Do they go? Lionel Hollins got let go in Memphis for many of the same reasons Mark Jackson just got let go. Do they go George Karl? After that, the big name list gets pretty thin pretty fast, right? I wrote my piece yesterday that went on the new UtahJazz.com site, kind of a soft launch to the new site. It's really nice. Hope you got a chance to see it. Total redesign, very good on the mobile. Hope you got a chance to see it. It's pretty cool. Titled "Becoming a Head Coach," and I went through that, and of former head coaches in the NBA, Van Gundy, George Karl, Avery Johnson. The word on Avery Johnson is he's likely to end up in the front office in New Orleans. Jeff Van Gundy. Does Mike D'Antoni end up in Golden State? Lionel Hollins, Nate McMillan, Scott Skiles. I mean, with Van Gundy, if Van Gundy goes off the list, and then I don't know, and Avery ends up going to New Orleans, then it's Lionel Hollins, Mike D'Antoni, or George Karl. They've done the George Karl game. Maybe they go back to it. What is the Knicks' backup plan if they don't get Kerr? My only thought is they end up buying Brian Shaw out of Denver, and Denver goes and gets themselves a new head coach. Cavaliers have a new head coach opening. I'm hearing, as everybody else, is Adrian Griffin, but I also heard the name Alvin Gentry, who has deep ties to their GM David Griffin. Minnesota, the word is that they're scouring the D-League list of people that we've talked about, the Quinn Gates, the Quinn Snyders, the Brian Gates, the Jay Larinagas, the Darvin Hams, the Nick Nurses of the world are being mentioned in Minnesota. The Lakers search seems to be very slow evolving, and that's everything that I've heard is going to take place in the Lakers search, is they're going to try to go get these big names, slow evolve. Some people think they'll make a run at Pop, try to see if they can go pull him out of San Antonio, which seems unlikely. They've bounced around the Roy Williams. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't go Mike Krzyzewski at some point. And I think they end up with Byron Scott. The other thing I'm hearing is that this is all going to wait for about 6 or 7 days at this point. The process is going to start, but the lottery, teams think that the lottery will change the way their team looks. Possibly, right? It can't get worse. But I do, from a Jazz standpoint, it is starting. The preliminary stages, from everything I kind of understand, I could be wrong, it could be delayed. I haven't talked to anybody in the last little while. But from everything I've understood this entire time and everything I've listened to, now it's starting. There's going to begin to be some initial conversations, whether they're video calls or phone calls. There's probably going to be some sit downs in Chicago. The process is going to get underway now as the initial work has largely been done. The combine hits in tomorrow, I believe, right? Isn't it the combine tomorrow and the next day, not Wednesday today? The big thing is going to be measurements. There was a nice piece by NBA Insider. A lot of people are not going to be, I mentioned this yesterday on the show, a lot of people aren't going to be involved. It's very disappointing how many players are not. Our second first-round pick, which I still think has a high chance of being kind of a European 18-year-old just with how young we are. But I think what should happen here, what the big news is going to be the measurements. And I think I mentioned this yesterday. You got to be careful of the red numbers. There's an interesting thing that was dropped by NBA Draft Insider, maybe? I probably should know exactly who that dropped this story. Nope, I'm sorry. No. I think NBA Draft Insider dropped it, which had some of the measurements from the previous high school measurements of these guys, which I thought was a really interesting angle to go back and see. Some guys may grow, some guys just be interested to see, and it was a nice little piece. It was from the Hoop Summit, and I don't know if this was shoes on or shoes off, but Eric Gordon came out at 6'9", with basically a 7-foot wingspan and a 8'10.5" inch reach. Compare that to Julius Randle, who also is 6'9", but 30 pounds higher. Randall's reach was a half-inch shorter, and reach was an inch shorter, and his wingspan was a half-inch shorter. Jabari, though's reach is at 6'8", wingspan is longer because he's so wide than either Gordon or Randall, but his reach is 2.5 inches shorter. I still have a great question on what position Jabari Parker plays. And Noah Vonleh, I don't know, I have to check how you pronounce that, is going to be the combine winner today in some ways. His wingspan is 7'4" at 6'9" 3/4, almost 6'10". So 7'4" compared to Randall's 6'11". And 8'10" reach is actually smaller than Gordon's. Reach sometimes can be more important. So just those were the high school numbers on these guys. It will be interesting to see when they come out. Wiggins comes out with a 7-foot wingspan, the same as Jabari Parker's at 6'8", 200 last year. I also think it'll be interesting to see where Andrew Wiggins is weight-wise. He was at 197 last year in the Nike Hoop Summit. Did he get any bigger at all at Kansas? By the way, Dante Exum, his wingspan last year was 6'9" and 6'9 1/4 at 6'6", which is interesting because it's 2.5 inches shorter than Andrew Wiggins at 6'8", but they may play different positions. Compare it to Harrison, who's 6'5", and if this is right, that's an incredibly short. That's a little longer wingspan, and I don't have the reach numbers for whatever reason. The way they posted this graphic, it doesn't have the reach numbers. So anyway, I don't know. Keep an eye on that. I think that's really going to be the story of the combine. Is the public story is going to be the numbers that we see on these guys more than anything else. All right, last night's games. Obviously, the officiating is just kind of over the top. Being discussed, rightfully so. Who knows whether that's the right call or not? I'm not about to tell you who that ball was off, or I don't know what the rule is. Stu Jackson was tweeting. I don't know. Okay, and I actually think some of the commentators on this should have been more honest about they don't know. What's incredible to me is the breakdowns on so many levels. We like to annihilate every coach in the world for their late game breakdowns, but frankly, there were a lot of them. Big Baby Davis was guarding Kevin Durant on his 3 out of a timeout. Really? You went with Blake Griffin guarding Serge Ibaka and Big Baby Davis on Kevin Durant at 30 feet, Doc? Scott Brooks, the in thing to do is to annihilate Scott Brooks. I think it's unfair, and I think it's unfair for a few reasons. One, his team wins and is good. Two, Russell Westbrook might be really hard to coach. And he may have gotten the most out of Russell Westbrook that anyone could fairly expect to get. Impressively so, actually. He really, to some extent, he gives Russell Westbrook this free reign to go just play. We then kill him for that. But do you really think we could put Russell Westbrook in a confined, organized, structured system successfully? I don't think so. I think that's a I think it's a crazy criticism that's out of control, frankly, with what's going on with Scott Brooks right now. Because at some point you've got to decide to look at the personnel that he has. Stop assuming that everyone's an idiot. He's had this personnel for 5 years. They're perfect. It's not like he's not aware they don't run offensive plays. There's got to be a reason why they run such little stuff. Maybe that's what his players can do best, and they've done it quite well. And out of that, you get 30-plus points out of Westbrook. And at the same time, if you want to know anything about Russell Westbrook, in a 2-point game, he retreated out of an open shot into a 3 with 7 seconds left at home. It's one of the worst plays I've ever seen in NBA history, and Chris Paul fouled him, making it even worse. If Russell Westbrook misses that shot, we're killing him today. And at the same time, we're killing Scott Brooks. Maybe it doesn't go both ways. Maybe Scott Brooks is actually maximizing everything you can get out of a personality like Russell Westbrook. Let him play. Tired of the constant Twitter blasting of these coaches that becomes the in thing regardless of really any deeper thought on it. It's a runaway train. It's an incredible end of a game, back to back. The Clippers had the series won. Frankly, the Thunder had the series won the game before. And in either circumstance, if either of them make a few plays, the series is over. Not maybe in the Clippers, definitely in the Thunder's case on game 4. And how does Indiana do what they did last night? That's nuts. Kevin Durant, who was awful last night, I'm not sure we've ever seen an MVP have back-to-back playoff games as bad as Kevin Durant had in the final fourth quarter of game 4 of this series, and that he had last night before he hits 2 or 3 of those shots in game 5. Woo! Clippers make one play. We are talking about Kevin Durant in a way and we're killing the Pacers today. The Pacers are the luckiest people on earth that we aren't talking about them. They may have walked themselves into a Game 7 situation with all the pressure in the world, playing a young team with enough veterans to play it freely. I don't think Washington will win 3 in a row, but who knows this year? Who knows? All right, coaching research. I did that the other day. That's the big story. I'll retweet it out. But I wanted to add 5 names out there that you may not have, that we have not mentioned before. Some that fit the 2 qualifications we had. Some that don't. Bob Byer is an assistant coach of the Bobcats right now. He was with the Golden State Warriors and the Orlando Magic, so he has the Stan Van Gundy tie. So he has the Thibodeau Van Gundy School of Basketball. He also was a head coach with Siena for 4 years. So he fits kind of that role, that qualification as well, where he has some head coaching experience, then an NBA assistant. Andy Greer in Chicago is an older, a little bit older than some of these other guys. Is a assistant in Chicago, works under Thibodeau. Was the interim head coach of Northern Illinois briefly in 2001. Went 5-23 in that time period. He also, prior to that, was 4 years head coach at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. Again, I don't know if it matters where he's a head coach, but he does have he has the Thibodeau tie. Melvin Hunt does not have any head coaching career. He's currently an assistant in Denver. What he does have is huge Dennis Lindsay ties. Melvin Hunt is an assistant. I believe he also may have played at Baylor, which is where Dennis went, and has deep ties there, if I have that right. So he was a Baylor player. Prior to that, prior to being in Denver, he kind of coached on every level, the collegiate, the high school coaching level, and lived in San Antonio for part of that. I may have been even coaching at David Robinson's school before getting back into the game. 5 years as an assistant with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and is now in his 3rd season with the Denver Nuggets. Does not have any head coaching experience that I'm aware of. Bob Bender, who's a head coach right now in Milwaukee, or assistant coach in Milwaukee, was the head coach of the Washington Huskies for a few years, so he fits another one on that list of college coaches that have that head coaching experience. All right, I want to introduce, let's see, what are we doing next? What do my notes say? I want to introduce you to Coach You Know. It's an interesting name to think about for a second. Thunder Dan Majerle. Is he possible next head coach capability for the Utah Jazz? He is currently the head coach of the Grand Canyon Antelopes. Now, the track record of going to be a college head coach straight to the NBA is pretty poor. But what about the fact that he spent 6 years as an assistant coach in Phoenix, most of it under D'Antoni and Gentry, then was let go in the last half and became the head coach of Grand Canyon University in their first year as a Division one program. They went 15-15 in the WAC and 10-6 overall. Pretty impressive for their first year. The WAC at this point is not what it once was. It's Cal Bakersfield and Chicago State and Grand Canyon and Idaho and Seattle University and UVU, and so it's not it's not the most awesome thing in the world, but they have Majerle seems to have done a fairly good job there. And Majerle was a two-time All-Defensive Team player in the NBA, three-time All-Star, mostly with the Phoenix. But he also, you have to remember, he spent the 5 years in Miami from 91 to 96, and I think that's what might make his resume a little bit more interesting, possibly, than some other guys. And you have to figure out when it would be worth sitting down with these guys, right? Because you have to figure out where they're coming from. In the sense of Jeff Hornacek has definitely used the Jerry Sloan aspect, but he really is Cotton Fitzsimmons as an in-game coach. He's used that free-flowing offensive system that Cotton used and very little of Sloan's structured system. He's probably using a lot of Jerry's behind-the-scenes things much more. But so what did Majerle learn in those years when he was with Miami? And if we go back and look at the 96, 97 Miami teams, I think some of those are Stan Van Gundy teams and some of those are Pat Riley teams. The 96, 97 team is a Riley coach team through maybe it's more Riley than I thought, through the lockout in 99. So he's got 5 years of, as I'm checking it right now, of Pat Riley experience to his resume. That suddenly makes him that definitely changes. The one coaching tree that has really worked in this business is that of Pat Riley. Couple that with Cotton Fitzsimmons, was the head coach that Majerle played under in Phoenix. That very free-flowing offensive system that's translating very well into this modern game, which is what Jeff Hornacek is running run last year. Is Majerle the one who actually may, more so than anyone else, emulate what Hornacek did? The irony that we could end up with Majerle and they would have Hornacek, but that he could play the Cotton Fitzsimmons offensive system while playing the Pat Riley, Thibodeau, Van Gundy defensive approach. Suddenly, I think, makes him a very interesting possible candidate. He's got NBA experience. He knows the NBA game well. He's 48 years old, and he spent a single year now as a head coach of a program. Maybe not as much as you'd like, but that does seem to be an important indicator in regards to people having some sort of success in their career. All right, let's go to the questions. Riley, how do I get a photo to appear in the bottom of the screen? This is a milestone event for Jazz fans that I need to have happen. Sorry, Angie has that exclusively to herself today, evidently. And nobody else gets, and Angie just sits there with a little smirk on her face the whole time. Riley, I need to add you to the listener circles on Google+, and then I think you'll get an invitation every day to enter in to the bottom thing. 2, who do you give more blame to? Chris Paul's multiple mistakes down the stretch last night causing the Clippers to lose, or do you give Westbrook more credit for making the plays that lead the Thunder to the win? I think you can do a lot of it. By the way, making 3 free throws in that circumstance is pretty incredible. It defies the odds, actually. I think he's about an 80% free throw shooter, and an 80% free throw shooter I think only makes, can't do the math. I'm not smart enough to do the math completely on the top of my head, but I think an 80% free throw shooter should only make 3 free throws in a row about 50% of the time. So he clutches up nicely in that. Durant hits that big 3, but Chris Paul did. Chris Paul made horrific errors, particularly also just the late game plays they made. Again, to the point of where I think I'm defending Scott Brooks a little bit, and I think that angle has gotten out of control on killing Scott Brooks because, frankly, it's almost every team does it. And particularly late in games, there's just not a lot of structure offense being run in this league right now. Here, let's take a second. Will you do that? We weren't planning to do this I wasn't planning to do this as our film study today, but Riley has taken me a different direction, which is fine. I appreciate it, Riley. But let's look at the fourth quarter and let me see if I can just find. I mean, this game, I get working the clock. There is a logic to it. It does make some sense. But here are the final 3 minutes of the game, up 8. Let's run through. Doc Rivers, one of the best coaches in the NBA. I mean, that's just not going to change my opinion on what I think of Doc Rivers. Here are the offensive possessions. I'm now watching these for the first time. This is different than what I had planned today.
They continue to defend.
Okay, so here they are. They're up 8, 3:18 left. This is their best play. This is their pick and roll, horns. We did this on film study before. It's fake action. DeAndre Jordan's going to roll right, and now he's going to walk himself back into a Blake Griffin pick. But watch, Chris Paul's very strange on this. Westbrook does a great job of defending here. I mean, this is where Westbrook's much better than people give him credit for. Look at that defense up on him. And also Ibaka sliding off of Blake Griffin over here. This prevents a great deal of movement. And so we walk into it in slow-mo. Chris Paul's trying to get – now Blake retreats out. This is not a well-executed play. Now Blake comes. Westbrook jumps up to the top beautifully, forces Paul into that double team. Durant slides over. Blake Griffin and Ibaka gets back. DeAndre Jordan is on the floor. Lack of spacing here kind of screws this thing up a little bit. Now you have 8 on the shot clock. Blake has nowhere to go, and so they just reset Chris Paul for another pick and roll, and this is just a tough, forced, bad possession. I mean, there's no other way to look at that other than a bad possession. Beautifully defended, okay? Beautifully defended is worth putting in there as well. Let's go to the next one. And that's their go-to play. Westbrook just blew it up. So here, 101-93, no change. And what do? They get into a half-court set. They slow this down. What are they going to do? One-on-one by Chris Paul on a mismatch with Kendrick Perkins. That is, we don't talk about this. This is a huge play by Kendrick Perkins here. Huge play. Chris Paul gets the mismatch, is going to go one-on-one. Kendrick Perkins holds his own on this more often than not. Again, Scott Brooks killed all the time for playing Kendrick Perkins. Pretty impressive right here. And Paul misses. Second straight miss. I don't think there's any, you had a mismatch, you went for it. That right there is what Kevin Pelton and I talk about a lot, why I believe in switching. More often than not, you end up with that. You end up with that kind of play. All right, 2-2, it's a 6-point game. And this is going to be a DeAndre Jordan offensive foul on a moving pick.
From the field, hit that three.
As the collapse begins to continue.
Moment ago, which led to.
Again, walking it up, no pace to their play. Slowed down. And that's a tough call, actually. See if we can get that one again. Wow, that is a tough call. For all the Tim Duncan picks we've looked at on this, that was a tough call. I had not seen that as clearly as I said. This was not what I intended to do for I mean, that's definitely – but here's the thing, okay? That's definitely a move, pick move. Give Westbrook credit. Westbrook is fighting up above this. It's in such a fashion that it makes the call happen. And so then Westbrook is caught up on that as Paul takes the tight angle. I'm not sure I think that's a very good call either, but I would say it's close enough, and Westbrook forced the officials in it. Well, now, still a 6-point game, 1:32 left in this game. And here we go again. Now, at this point, working down the clock does make some sense. You're up 6, but you got to keep playing. So they play high pick and roll, overload the right side. Chris Paul is supposed to go left side, pick and roll, isolation. Blake rolls down the middle. If he can shield off the defender in the middle of Ibaka, he probably is clear. Let's see what happens. Westbrook jumps out on top of it, So Chris Paul retreats. Westbrook probably not enough talk about how good Westbrook's defense is at this point. So now Chris Paul just backs it back out. Shot clock's down to 9 at this point. And we're in slow-mo. I'll get out of it, and then we can pause it and go back to it when we need to. He's at 7. He's at 6. Now he runs it. 4.9 seconds left in the quarter. You start your 3. And Paul has decided that they're not going to run any action with Blake, that this is the shot he wants. And it's not a very good one. It's a Jamal Crawford bomb for 3. That is as bad a late game possession as you can have, and that's with the best point guard in the NBA. They finally execute, by the way, with 1:08 left. Blake Griffin goes to the free throw line. He misses 1 of 2. Chris Paul then gets the rebound, hits it. It's now a 7-point game. And they seemingly, despite all of this, they're in total control. So let's watch. Then the last one is Jamal Crawford misses a layup. Oh, you didn't. You're just looking at me. You're not seeing anything. That's an ugly thought. All right, so here we go again. Let me back it up because I don't actually know where we are. So 4-point game, 40 seconds left. This is probably smart to work down the clock a little bit. Now, you're frazzled. Crawford works to the top. Now, first of all, how is this happening? You have the best point guard in the NBA, and you're going to have Jamal Crawford, who I got as an okay player, running your play? Again, if Scott Brooks is doing this, we're killing him. And again, it's Kendrick Perkins on a switch. How awesome is that? And Crawford misses. Kendrick Perkins, I'll tweet this out when we're done, had 2 isolation switches, one on Paul, one on Crawford late, and the Thunder didn't score, and the Clippers didn't score on either. They score on one of them, they win the game. That's big defensive play by Kendrick Perkins. That was interesting. Thank you very much to Riley O'Brien for those, because I would not have done that as our film study. That wraps up our film study. Hope it was worth something. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.